Good morning. Somebody emailed me and asked me what the postnominals after my name mean, PF, HEA. So I thought I'd just explain something about the way that the fellowship scheme works for the Higher Education Academy here in the UK. It's a UK-based organisation, association, that's effectively the professional body for teaching practitioners, academics in higher education. There are other bodies that represent the university administration staff, and also other associations and bodies that provide organisation and support for researchers. So it's very much about the teaching and learning dimension of higher education. So it's not the professional body for the whole of higher education. They are now part of something called Advance HE, and I'll do another video about that. But essentially they are a professional association for teachers, if you like, in higher education. And they have a fellowship scheme for professional recognition, effectively, in 4 different categories. So the HEA is the higher education. The HEA is the higher education part of the postnominal. Then you can be an AF, an associate fellow, an F, a fellow, an SF, a senior fellow, or a PF, a principal fellow. So I'm a principal fellow of the Higher Education Academy. The 4 categories of fellowship are often misinterpreted, and I think arguably there's certainly been some claim that they're not necessarily particularly well named, but I just want to explain the distinction between them being categories of fellowship rather than being levels. So there's no assumption that you are necessarily going to go in as an associate fellow and then ultimately end up as a principal fellow, because it's not about duration of time served. It's not about how long you've been in your role or what incremental improvements or enhancements you might have done in your practice within a particular category. It's very much about the role that you play in higher education. So an associate fellowship is aimed primarily at teaching faculty, so even teaching assistants, people that maybe have fractional teaching roles. Fellowships are the broad range of academic functions, including writing, assessment, and designing programs, and so on. Senior fellows have a leadership role, not necessarily within their discipline. It might be that they represent leadership within a particular theme. They might lead on employability or international students or some aspect of practice, usually across their institution, but very often between institutions. And principal fellows have a strategic role, again, very much within an institution, but very often between institutions. So they'll have an institution-wide strategic impact, or a very significant thematic lead within the sector. So there are different categories of fellowship, not levels. That's quite important. The way in my practice, when I try and communicate that difference to people, I very often use slightly different words. So I associate fellow, senior fellow, and principals as being teaching fellowships, academic fellowships, leadership fellowships, and strategic fellowships. And I think arguably that's a little bit clearer then about people knowing which category they're going to go for. So what's more common is that people argue about whether they should go for a fellowship or a senior fellowship because they've been appointed to a role where they maybe are a program lead. The actual role that you do on a day-to-day basis is rarely sufficient to qualify you for an automatic recognition. You need to require to generate evidence that you have a sustained engagement in that particular category. So I think it's just important to differentiate them as categories rather than as levels, and to think about them as being teaching, academic, leadership, and strategic categories of fellowship. I hope that's clear.